My name is Renee Caldwell. I am 36 years old, and I am a licensed real estate attorney in Houston, Texas. I spend my days reading contracts that other people signed without understanding them. I know exactly what it costs when someone puts your name on a document you never agreed to. Which is why the morning two process servers knocked on my door at 7:45 on a Tuesday, handed me a stack of legal papers with my name on them, and asked me to confirm my address. I did not panic. I went very, very still. Because I had not signed anything, but my family had. And for 3 years, they had been doing it from the address of the home I had purchased alone, furnished alone, and paid for alone. The address they had used without asking. The address that was now attached to a civil lawsuit, 2 unpaid business loans, and a collections notice from a commercial lender I had never heard of in my life. I took the papers from the process server, thanked him by name because I had read his lanyard, closed my door, and sat down at my kitchen table in the house that was supposed to be mine. Then I opened my laptop. Not to cry, not to call my mother, to work. Before I tell you what I found when I started pulling the thread, and before I tell you what I did with everything I found, tell me first. What time is it where you are right now? And where are you watching from? Because I want to know how many people are sitting somewhere tonight who have handed their family their trust and are only now beginning to wonder what was done with it. To understand how my address ended up on someone else's debt, you have to understand my family's relationship with appearances. My parents, Gerald and Loretta Caldwell, raised 3 children in a rented house in Beaumont, Texas, on the kind of income that required careful management and the specific pride of people who refused to let the outside world see the inside reality. My father worked for the city. My mother managed the books for a small landscaping company until it closed. They were not irresponsible people. They were people who had learned that looking stable was almost as important as being stable, and over time those two things had quietly traded places. My older brother Marcus had inherited that same instinct, except in him it had grown into something more ambitious and considerably more reckless. Marcus is 41. He is the kind of man who describes himself as an entrepreneur with the confidence of someone who has never once examined the word too closely. Over the last decade, he had started, partially run, and quietly abandoned 4 businesses: a mobile car detailing operation, a vending machine route, a party supply rental company, and most recently, a food truck he called Caldwell Eats that had briefly operated out of a commissary kitchen in Beaumont before the health department got involved. None of this was information he shared with me in real time. What I received instead were phone calls, monthly and then bi-monthly, warm and chatty, always ending with a casual mention of something that had come up. Something small, nothing dramatic, just a thing that needed handling. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. Could I help bridge a gap just until the business found its footing? I had helped bridge those gaps 11 times over 4 years. I had also attended every holiday dinner where Marcus sat at my parents' table being described as a visionary. My mother used that word without irony. Visionary. I had a word for it too. I kept it to myself. My younger sister Tamara was different, quieter. She had a steady job as a dental hygienist in League City, a husband, 2 kids, and the particular skill of people who grow up in loud families of staying just far enough to the side that the chaos never quite reaches them. Tamara called me on birthdays and checked in during hurricanes. She was not close. She was not unkind. She had simply learned early that some distance was the only honest response to how our family worked. I had learned the opposite lesson. I had stayed close. I had stayed available. I had handed over money and expertise and legal advice, and my physical address, apparently, and called it being a good daughter. I had bought my house in Houston 4 years earlier, a 3-bedroom craftsman in the Heights neighborhood, with a deep front porch and original hardwood floors, and a study where I kept client files and worked late, and had, for the first time in my adult life, felt like I was standing on something solid. I had not invited my family to move into that solidity, but I had told them my address. That was enough. The lawsuit named me as a registered agent for something called Caldwell Enterprise Solutions, LLC. I had never heard of Caldwell Enterprise Solutions LLC. I pulled the Secretary of State filing in under 4 minutes. The company had been registered 14 months earlier. The registered agent on file was listed as Renee Caldwell, 4714 Norwood Street, Houston, Texas. My name, my address, my house. The signature on the formation documents was not mine. I sat with that for exactly the length of time it took me to finish my coffee. Then I pulled the business loan documents attached to the lawsuit. The company had borrowed $68,000 from a commercial lender in Beaumont. The loan was in default. The lender was suing to recover the outstanding balance plus fees and interest, which had by then grown to slightly over $82,000. I searched the lender's name. Then I searched Caldwell Enterprise Solutions. Then I searched the address on the loan documents, which was a mailbox store in Beaumont that rented addresses to businesses. The phone number on the application was Marcus's number. I knew it by memory because I had transferred money to the account attached to it 11 times. I set my phone down on the table. I did not call Marcus. I did not call my parents. I opened a new client file, labeled it with today's date, and began to document everything I had just found. In the same format I used for clients, same headers, same notation system, same approach I would use if this had happened to a stranger who had walked into my office looking for help. The distance that creates is the only way I know how to survive something clearly before I respond to it. By noon, I had found the second loan, a separate lender, $55,000. Same company name, same registered agent, same address, also in default. That one had gone to a collections firm 3 months earlier. That was where the second notice had come from. Together, the two loans represented $140,000 in debt that had been opened in a company registered in my name, at my address, without my knowledge or consent. I called my office, rescheduled my afternoon, and drove to Beaumont. My parents' house looked the same as it always did. The same wind chime on the porch my mother had hung the year I passed the bar. The same truck in the driveway my father had been meaning to replace for 6 years. The same feeling, pulling up to it, of a place that had once been safety and had slowly revealed itself to be something more complicated. My mother opened the door before I reached the porch. She read my face in under a second and immediately shifted into the softened, slightly confused expression she wore whenever something was about to require explanation. I asked her where Marcus was. She said he was inside. She said, was everything okay? She said I looked tired. I told her I was not tired. I told her I had driven from Houston with a folder of documents I needed her and my father and Marcus to look at, and I needed all 3 of them at the kitchen table at the same time. She stepped aside. My father was in the living room. He looked up from the television and I could see him recalibrating immediately, the way men do when the energy in a room arrives before the explanation does. Marcus was in the kitchen eating leftover something from a foil container. He looked up when I walked in and smiled the way he always did, reflexive and warm, the smile of a man who had never once had a reason to stop using it on me. I put the folder on the kitchen table. I told them to sit down. My mother said, "Renee, what is happening?" I said, "I'm going to show you." I did not raise my voice once. That is the part I want you to understand. I laid the Secretary of State filing on the table first. My name, my address, a company I had never heard of. I pointed to the signature line and told them it was not my signature. My father looked at it for a long time without speaking. My mother looked at Marcus. Marcus set down his fork and said, "Renee, listen, it's more complicated than it looks." I told him I was an attorney. I understood exactly how it looked. He said he had only used my address because the mailbox store address kept getting flagged by the lenders, and he needed a residential address to get approved, and he had only meant it to be temporary. I asked him what temporary meant when the company had been registered for 14 months. He said things had taken longer than expected. I put the first loan document on the table. $68,000, his phone number, my address, my name as registered agent. My mother made a sound. I put the second loan document on top of it. 55,000. Same structure. My father said, "Marcus." Not a question. Not even a sentence. Just his name, placed down heavily, like the folder. Marcus said he had been planning to pay both loans off before they went into default. He said the food truck had been doing well until it wasn't. He said he had a new opportunity he was in the middle of developing that would have covered everything. I asked him whether any part of what he had just said was a plan or whether it was the outline of a plan he intended to construct later. He did not answer. I told him I was named in a civil lawsuit I had nothing to do with. I told him my credit profile had been flagged. I told him I had spent my career building the kind of professional reputation that allowed me to serve clients who trusted me with their most significant financial decisions, and that reputation was now attached to a defaulted commercial loan that a collections firm was actively pursuing. My mother said, "Can you fix it?" I looked at her for a moment. That question, said in that tone, as if the natural conclusion of discovering that my name had been forged and my address used without consent was whether I, the attorney in the family, would make the problem disappear. I told her I could file to have my name removed as registered agent. I told her that would not resolve the lawsuit. I told her Marcus would need his own legal representation and that the lenders would pursue him directly once my name was properly separated from the company. My father asked what that meant for Marcus. I told him it meant Marcus would have to face consequences for debt he had taken on. My mother said, "He's your brother, Renee." There it was. The sentence that had been in the room since I walked in, just waiting for someone to say it out loud. He is your brother. As if that phrase had ever once protected me from anything. As if it was a complete legal argument. As if I was supposed to hear it and immediately reorder everything I knew about what had just happened to me. I told her I was aware of the relationship. I told her it was the reason I had driven to Beaumont instead of filing the removal paperwork from my office and letting the process servers handle the rest. I put one more document on the table. It was a letter. I had drafted it in the car before I went inside, because I am the kind of woman who writes things down before she walks into rooms where she knows the air will be difficult to breathe. It was addressed to Marcus. It outlined what had been done. It listed every loan, every document, every date. It stated clearly that I would be filing to remove my name as registered agent and cooperating fully with the lender's legal proceedings. It noted that I had documented 11 prior financial transfers totaling $16,400 that I had made in good faith to support his various business ventures over the previous 4 years. It said those transfers were now concluded. It said future contact about financial matters would be directed to me in writing only. Marcus read it slowly. When he looked up, his face was doing something unfamiliar. Not anger. Not the charm. Something underneath both of those. He said, "I didn't think it would get this far." I told him I knew. I told him that was the problem. People who use other people's names and addresses and goodwill to prop up their own decisions never think it will get this far. They operate on the assumption that the person they are using will absorb whatever comes. That family means the capable one covers the distance between what you attempted and what you actually built. I told him I was done covering that distance. My father said, "What do you need from us?" I looked at him. That question, from him, at that moment, was the most honest thing he had said to me in years. I told him I did not need anything from them except for what I had always needed and rarely received: the acknowledgement that what had been done to me was wrong. Not complicated. Not a misunderstanding. Not something that happened because things got harder than expected. Wrong. My father nodded once. My mother pressed her hands flat on the table and looked at the documents for a long time without speaking. Then she said, "I didn't know." I told her I believed her. I also told her that not knowing was a pattern in this family, and that pattern had costs, and those costs had always landed on me. She did not argue. That silence from my mother, the woman who had an answer for everything, was the closest thing to accountability I had ever received in that house. I drove back to Houston that evening. I filed the registered agent removal the next morning. My attorney contacted the lenders directly to clarify my position. The process took 6 weeks of documentation and 2 phone depositions before my name was fully and formally separated from Caldwell Enterprise Solutions LLC and everything attached to it. Marcus hired a bankruptcy attorney. I did not recommend one. He did not ask me to. That was progress of a kind. The lawsuit moved forward without my name on it. My credit profile was flagged for a period before the dispute was resolved. I had to write a formal letter to 2 lenders explaining the situation. I had to disclose it to my firm. That conversation was the most professionally uncomfortable 40 minutes of my career. None of that would have happened if my brother had asked me before he used my name. The answer would have been no. But he had not asked because he already knew the answer, and had decided that what he needed mattered more than what I had the right to refuse. That is not a complicated calculation. It is a simple one, and it tells you everything about how someone sees you. Marcus called me 8 weeks after the Beaumont dinner. His voice was different, smaller. The specific smallness of a man who has been through something and come out the other side with less performance left. He said he was sorry. Not in pieces, not with a caveat attached. He said he was sorry for what he had done, and that he had never meant to drag me into it. But that not meaning to was not the same as not doing it, and he understood that now. I told him I heard him. I told him I would need time before I knew what that meant for us. He said he understood. That call lasted 9 minutes. It was the most honest 9 minutes we had ever spent on the phone. My mother called the following Sunday as she always had. She did not mention Marcus or the documents or the dinner. She asked about my week. She asked if I was eating. She told me about the wind chime getting knocked down in a storm and my father refusing to rehang it at his age. I listened to her talk for 20 minutes and thought about how much of love is just showing up in the ordinary moments, even when the extraordinary ones have been painful. At the end of the call, she said, "I should have known what he was doing." I told her yes. She said, "I'm sorry I didn't protect you." I told her that meant more than she probably understood. We stayed on the line for another few minutes after that, not saying anything particularly important. Sometimes that is what repair sounds like before it becomes something you can name. I want to say something before this ends, and I want to say it plainly. If you have ever been the person in your family whose name, address, credit, professional reputation, or financial stability was treated as a shared resource without your agreement, that is not family. That is access. And there is a difference between people who love you and people who have learned that loving you is optional, but using you is very, very convenient. The folder I put on that kitchen table was not revenge. It was documentation. It was the physical version of every assumption my family had made about what I would absorb, organized, and presented back to them in a language they could not reframe or soften or schedule around. People who live by convenience hate clarity. They call it cruelty when you name things precisely. They call it coldness when you stop absorbing costs they never intended to pay back. They call it distance when you simply decide that having a family relationship no longer includes having an open account with your name on it. I am still in contact with my family. Not because the dinner fixed everything. It did not. Not because Marcus's phone call erased what he did. It did not. But because I no longer need the relationship to be something it isn't before I can survive inside it. I moved forward. From my house. In my name. At my address. The one that belongs to me. And if you are sitting somewhere right now carrying someone else's decisions in your name, I hope this story reminds you that your name is the one thing you were given before anyone had the chance to ask you for something.